Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mysteries and Oddities video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here. This one yet again based on one of your new suggestions. This one a very fascinating pick because the subject matter that I'll talk about here in 1 minute, I actually encountered it as well. It was quite a treat when I was reading this information because it dawned on me. I realized that I actually had a very similar experience to this particular subject matter. Very creepy experience too. I'm going to save that for the end, so be sure to come back afterward when it comes to that. But in this case, it has to do with what's considered a very unique set of mannequins that were found and continued to be there for a long time at a house called the John Lawson's House, which is located there in Ontario, Canada. In fact, you're looking at a picture of some of those mannequins here. I'm going to share the information as to why they're considered very unique. Apparently, it's also a very creepy tourist attraction because these mannequins apparently move by themselves. That's right. That's what makes it so unique. And my own experience also ties into that as well. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. In this case being the John Lawson House Mannequins. And I'd love to hear what your comments are, especially those of you that happen to be there in Ontario, Canada to go see these mannequins. So here's what happened. The location again is there in Ontario, Canada, specifically at a village called New Hamburg. This is a village that has been there for a good while, at least in the mid-1800s or so. Sometime back then, there was a gentleman by the name of John Lawson who actually built a home there on what's called the New Hamburg's Main Street district. He built the home back in 1845. In fact, he was what was considered one of the first colonists, a descendant of one of the first colonist families at that location. And when he built it, the house itself was also considered very prominent. The way it looked like back then, it was described as being a central hall house with central cross gable, bracketed cornice, corbelled chimneys, and arched top windows. In fact, again, you're looking at a picture of the house itself here. It doesn't really stand out too much these days. I don't know if there was like changes to it afterward, but that is the actual house too. Fascinating stuff, right? So it would just be just a regular house to this day that people would just walk by. But there's some very eerie history that I'll talk about here in one moment. Part of it, though, is tied to this, or potentially tied to it. There were two tragedies that occurred surrounding that house that mystified people. One of them was this. This was actually a very tragic one. On February 6, 1871, there was one train that was heading from the Albany area towards New Hamburg and eventually going to another location. It was just containing freight, like in this case it was oil. Then there was another train coming from the opposite direction. It was coming from New York City heading towards Albany, but at a certain point it would cross New Hamburg. This was a train though that was having passengers. In fact, there were over 200 passengers on that train. As it happened though on that fateful night, that freight train, the one containing the oil, it passed underneath a tunnel there while it was in New Hamburg, and I guess the darkness of the tunnel allowed whoever was there, the station switchman, to see, hey, something is wrong with that train's axle. Something was broken on it. It was causing sparks to come out. Obviously, they became much more prominent in all that darkness. And so they were able to get that axle, try to do something with it, but it was too late. One of the cars actually derailed from that broken axle. And then when that happened, it landed on the track of the other train, the one that was coming again from the opposite direction. And so one of the engineers there obviously saw that this could be a huge problem. And so they got off, they ran across, they sure enough saw the other train coming. This was the one with those 200 plus passengers. And then they tried as much as they could. They held red lights, they held something else, some kind of fire, something that would try to get the attention of the oncoming train. That engineer, whoever was manning that train, actually saw it in time, but they couldn't stop. There was just too much weight on the train and the distance was too short. And so when that happened, it slammed right there onto that disengaged other track, that other train. that was there. And then when that happened, there was a big explosion. What made things worse is that the one that was disengaged contained oil. It was the actual oil itself. And so it caused a huge fiery explosion. And then when that happened, some of the people were able to get out, but 22 people ultimately lost their lives. This happened right nearby, in fact, almost near in front of the John Lawson house. And then a little bit later, 6 years later, on May 3rd, 1877, there was yet another incident surrounding the house involving fire. Somewhere in there was a store that was owned by a guy named Frank Myers, and either something happened in terms of there being an accidental fire, or if it was more nefarious, there was an arsonist that was there that night. There's no true details as to which was which, but it caused flames to catch his store on fire. He tried to stop it. It was too little too late. It spread around some of the other areas. On top of that, it ended up going into another location that had gasoline. In fact, there was kerosene within one of the rooms. And so there was a big explosion, and then it caused some of the other surrounding buildings to catch on fire too. And then pretty much by the next morning, there was an entire block there that was just smithereens, just pure ashes at that point. I couldn't quite tell though if there was any losses of life there. One would hope not, right? But at the same time, with it being such a big fire, there's a good chance that there were more lives lost. Interestingly enough, though, the John Lawson house once again remained untouched. And so cut to sometime later, there's no real indication when this started happening, but there was now some mannequins that started appearing on the house, either let's say in the front of the house, the front porch, or in let's say the windows, or in other positions of the house itself. What made things eerie was several things. Number one, nobody knew who owned the house, and nobody knew who was doing this, so it remained mysterious there. Also, the mannequins were wearing clothing that was considered vintage. In fact, they was almost matching the time period associated with those two fires that I was mentioning earlier. And then the other thing that made it eerie was this. People could swear that the mannequins would move. They would change positions by the day. Obviously, one indication is somebody was moving them and nobody saw it when that happened. Like, unless someone was there monitoring the house hour by hour, minute by minute, they could not see somebody just coming by and changing it, or there truly was something supernatural that was going on. If you go by that angle, the theory is this: those two tragedies, those two fire tragedies, and the spirit surrounding that location, they found home. They found a location there at the John Lawson house, and they were inhibiting these mannequins. And that happened for a good while. In fact, it ended up going all the way to 2016 when suddenly the mannequins disappeared. Nobody knew where they went. Nobody knew, again, who did them, whoever was doing them, or if it was something else supernatural. It just stopped on that year itself, and they never reappeared. But imagine that. Imagine walking by and then seeing these mannequins, walking by the next day, seeing them, but they've changed position, maybe even coming by the same day as well, and then seeing that they've changed multiple times. Also, the mannequins were known to face the same area associated with that train tragedy, the one involving the people that ended up dying on that train's explosion. So eerie stuff. Mannequins all in themselves are actually quite scary. But imagine something like this where you don't know why they're being there, what they're doing, how they're being moved, and so on. That's the situation with the John Lawson house. Maybe they'll reappear later on. To this day, again, it's considered very much a touristy attraction. I would love to go see it. If anyone is there in the Ontario, Canada area, the new Hamburg place, a great opportunity to go see this type of history. And who knows, you might have something there happen too in terms of whatever was causing the eeriness of the mannequins. Now, to my story, that's this. You're looking at a picture of this mannequin here. A couple of years back, and I mentioned this story as well in the past, but it's good to mention it here again. I was in Tyler, Texas, there for the paranormal conference that happened. I think this was back in like 2017, 2018, the first time I went. I went to a location called the Warehouse in that warehouse, there were these mannequins. Me being new to the place, having no history of it, I just thought to myself, this is pretty cool. Like I went in, but immediately, like 30 seconds in, something caused me to give the heebie-jeebies so badly. I immediately ran out. Like I didn't really run out, but I walked out as quickly as possible. This was because I was by myself, almost in complete darkness, with just one flashlight that wasn't really giving too much light, it seemed. And I was surrounded by these mannequins. Well, later on, I learned why I had such bad, ill feelings. Those mannequins moved. The story goes that that location at that warehouse is severely haunted. There's something there. And not only that, but it is actually in the mannequins. And the one you're looking at now, that's one of those mannequins. I don't know what happened to the other mannequins, because the warehouse now is actually a almost like a thrift antique store now. But I don't know what happened to the other mannequins, but this is one of the remaining ones. And this mannequin, the position you're looking at now, was there at another location that I went to for a Tyler Paranormal Conference Con probably a couple of years later. And I was told that it was kept specifically in that spot because it kept moving still. Nobody knows how it moves, but it starts moving and it starts causing a ruckus. Obviously, when nobody's able to see it, but they hear noises, they hear shifting, people have no idea what's happening, and then when they go to the room, that's when they see it, but it's in a different position and nobody touched it. So eerie stuff. So the same thing that the people are encountering with the John Lawson house, I encountered as well, and believe me, it is a very eerie feeling. So, but if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, then please post those comments below. What about those of you lucky enough to go see that John Lawson house? If you have any comments, let me know. Please share them. It's always great to read them and then have others read them as well. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.